All right, today we're cracking open a case file, and it's a real cautionary tale. We're talking about a cyber attack that was so massive, it literally brought one of the biggest names in the car world to a dead stop.
Let's just start with a number, because it really tells you everything you need to know. 1.9 billion pounds. Yeah, that's the estimated price tag for this single event. And that's not just a company's loss. We're talking about the shockwave that hit an entire country's auto industry.
And look, this wasn't just, some run-of-the-mill data breach. The Cyber Monitoring Center had a much stronger name for it. They called it the single most financially damaging cyber event ever to hit the UK. I mean, think about that. A full-blown corporate catastrophe.
So the big question is, how does a digital attack rack up a bill in the billions? Well, to get that, you have to picture the crime scene. A global giant, just frozen, completely paralyzed.
So on September 1st, the moment they realized someone was inside their network, Jaguar Land Rover did something pretty drastic. They didn't just try to wall off a server or two. Nope. They slammed on the emergency brake for their entire global operation. Imagine that. Shutting everything down everywhere just to stop the bleeding.
And you can see here, this wasn't just some local issue in the UK. We're talking a global shutdown. The assembly lines went silent at their big plants in the UK, sure, but also in Slovakia, Brazil, India, all over the world. For weeks, nothing. Not a single car made. Anywhere.
So what in the world could cause a company to do that? To shut itself down completely? Well, let's follow the breadcrumbs. Let's see how these guys pulled it off.
Okay, so this timeline really lays out how this whole thing went down. And it wasn't an overnight explosion. It started small, some weird IT behavior in late August that probably seemed minor at the time. Then, boom, September 1st, they realize what's happening and they pull the plug. 2 days later, a hacker group actually takes credit. The shutdown just keeps getting extended, and it's not until early October, almost 6 weeks later, that they even begin the slow, painful process of starting back up.
So you'd think the way in must have been some super sophisticated state-of-the-art hack, right? Nope, it was a phone call. That's it. It's called vishing, or voice phishing. The attackers literally just called up an employee, pretended to be from the help desk, and convinced them to hand over their password. It's that simple, and that's scary.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because that one stolen password was just the first domino to fall. It created this cascade of failure. Step 1, they get the password through that vishing call. Step 2, they use it to log in, and it works, because there was no multi-factor authentication. You know that little code you get on your phone? It wasn't required. Step 3, once they're in, they find a known, unpatched bug in some SAP software to get even more power. And finally, Step 4, with that high-level access, they realize the network is totally flat. There are no internal walls. They can go anywhere. And that's when JLR had to shut it all down.
I mean, let's just lay these failures out, because they are pretty shocking. No mandatory multi-factor authentication. They found passwords that were years old, still active. Critical software flaws that had known fixes were just sitting there, unpatched. And maybe the biggest one, the corporate IT network and the actual factory operations network were basically the same thing. There was no separation. The attackers didn't have to break down the door. The keys were just handed to them.
And this right here, this is probably the most frustrating part of the whole story. The big vulnerability the hackers used to take over everything, it was in their SAP software. And look at this. A patch to fix that exact problem was available back in April. The attack happened in September. That's almost 5 months. This whole thing, this billion-pound disaster, was completely preventable.
So now that we know how they did it, let's go back to the aftermath. Let's really tally up the damage here, because it is staggering.
Just look at this chart. This is incredible. The JLR shutdown was so big, it actually dragged down the entire UK car production for the month. I mean, the whole country's output dropped by 27% year over year. That one event pushed the numbers to their lowest point for September since 1952. That's just wild.
And what does that look like in terms of actual cars? Well, the estimate is over 30,000. 30,000 vehicles that were supposed to roll off the line just didn't. They never got made. Think of the lost sales, the lost revenue. It's just a huge, huge hole in their books.
And the pain didn't stop with JLR. Think about it. A car company that big has a massive supply chain. We're talking about roughly 5,000 other businesses, smaller companies that make all the little parts. When JLR stopped building cars, all of those companies suddenly had nowhere to send their products. It's a devastating chain reaction. So you see, this attack was like a 1-2 punch. Punch 1, shut down the factories, right? The main goal was probably extortion. Pay us or we keep you offline. But then came punch 2. They also stole a ton of data while they were in there. We're talking customer info, internal source code, even secret engineering designs. They weren't just holding the company hostage, they were raiding the vault at the same time.
So we've seen the crime, we've seen how they did it, and we've seen the damage. What's the takeaway here? What's the lesson that every single company, big or small, should be learning from this mess?
This chart really puts it all into perspective. On the left, you've got what JLR was doing, or not doing. Things like inconsistent MFA, that flat network we talked about, and being way behind on patching. And on the right, that's just basic, standard-issue cybersecurity. It's not rocket science. And that gap, the space between those two columns, that's where the billion-pound disaster lives.
And that's really the key thing to remember here. The playbook that would have stopped this whole thing isn't some secret, expensive, complex strategy. It's the absolute fundamentals of cybersecurity. Enforce MFA everywhere. Patch your stuff when a fix comes out. Separate your networks. Give people only the access they absolutely need to do their job. It's blocking and tackling. It's the basics.
So when you close this case file, the lesson is chillingly clear. A known software flaw that had a fix and a single stolen password were enough to cripple a global giant. It really makes you stop and think, and it leaves us with one really important question to ask ourselves. What's protecting your front door?